The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of the kingdom's capital city. Captain adjusted his polished armor as he began his routine patrol through the marketplace. At 35, he had served the royal guard for 15 years, earning respect through his unwavering dedication and compassionate nature. Unlike many of his fellow guards who saw their duty as merely maintaining order, genuinely cared about the people he protected. The marketplace buzzed with its usual energy. Merchants called out their wares, children darted between stalls chasing stray cats, and the aroma of fresh bread mixed with the scent of exotic spices from distant lands. Nodded to familiar faces as he walked, his presence both commanding and reassuring. Mrs. the flower vendor waved warmly as he passed, while old Thomas, who sold handcrafted tools, tipped his worn hat in greeting. It was during this peaceful morning that first noticed the small figure following him. A boy, no more than 8 years old, with sandy brown hair that stuck up in all directions and clothes that had seen better days. The child kept a careful distance, ducking behind market stalls whenever glanced in his direction. At first, the captain thought nothing of it. Children were naturally curious about the royal guards, often following them around hopping to hear tales of adventure or catch glimpses of their gleaming weapons. But as the morning progressed, realized this was different. The boy's behavior wasn't driven by childish fascination. There was something urgent, almost desperate in the way he moved. His small hands trembled as he clutched what appeared to be a piece of torn fabric, and his eyes, when caught glimpses of them, held a fear that no child should ever have to bear. The breakthrough came when deliberately slowed his pace near the fountain in the town square. The boy, thinking he was unobserved, hurried closer, his bare feet silent on the stones. When suddenly turned around, the child froze like a deer caught in torchlight. "Hello there," said gently, crouching down to the boy's level. His voice was soft, the same tone he used when speaking to his own nephew. "I'm Captain, what's your name?" The boy's eyes widened with panic and for a moment thought he might run, but then something seemed to break inside the child and tears began streaming down his dirty cheeks. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You have to help them. They're in the van and the bad men won't let them out." Felt his heart skip a beat. In his years of service, he had developed an instinct for recognizing genuine distress, and everything about this boy screamed that something terrible was happening. "What van?" he asked, keeping his voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "Where are your parents, son?" The boy's tears came faster now. "The gray van by the old mill. My mama and papa are inside, and my little sister too. The men said they would hurt them if I told anyone, but I can't just leave them there. Please, sir, you have to save them." His mind raced. The old mill was on the outskirts of town, a place that had been abandoned for years after the miller's family moved to the city. It was isolated, making it the perfect location for criminal activity, but he needed more information before he could act. "What's your name?" he asked again, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. The child replied, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Copper, my papa makes horseshoes and mama sells vegetables at the market. At least, they did before the bad men took them." Recognized the name. The Copper family had indeed been regular fixtures at the market, but he realized he hadn't seen them in several days. At the time, he had assumed they were perhaps visiting relatives or dealing with illness. The truth was far more sinister. "How long have they been missing?" asked. 3 days, said, his voice breaking. "The men came to our house at night. They had masks and made Mama and Papa come with them. They left me behind, but I followed them. I've been hiding near the mill, trying to find a way to help, but there are too many of them." The pieces were starting to fall into place, and felt a cold anger building in his chest. This sounded like the work of human traffickers, criminals who had been operating in the shadows of the kingdom for months. The royal guard had been tracking several disappearances, but the perpetrators had proven elusive, always staying one step ahead of their investigations. "You were very brave to come find me," said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "But I need you to tell me everything you know about these men. How many are there? Are they armed?" Wiped his eyes and took a shaky breath, clearly trying to be helpful despite his fear. "I counted 4 of them. They have knives and one has a crossbow. They take turns watching the van, but sometimes they all go inside the mill to eat or sleep." Nodded, already formulating a plan, but he knew he couldn't act alone. These criminals were dangerous, and if they felt cornered, they might harm their captives. He needed backup, but he also couldn't risk his family by waiting too long. I'm going to help your family, but I need you to do something very important for me, said. I need you to go to the guard station and find Sergeant Williams. Tell him exactly what you told me and tell him that Captain said to prepare a rescue team. Can you do that? The boy nodded eagerly, hope beginning to replace the despair in his eyes. But what about Mama and Papa? What if the bad men hurt them while I'm gone? I'm going to watch the mill, assured him. I won't let anything happen to them, but I need that backup to make sure we can get them out safely. You're the only one who can help me save them. Are you brave enough? Straightened his small shoulders and was struck by the courage he saw in the child's face. Yes, sir, I can do it. Good, now run as fast as you can, and remember, Sergeant Williams, rescue team, captain's orders. As sprinted toward the guard station, his bare feet flying over the cobblestones, felt a mixture of pride and urgency. The boy had shown incredible courage in seeking help, but now the real challenge began. Had to reach the old mill, assess the situation, and somehow keep the Copper family safe until reinforcements arrived. He commandeered a horse from the nearest stable, leaving word with the stable master about where he was headed in case additional backup was needed. As he rode through the winding streets toward the outskirts of town, his mind was focused on strategy. He had dealt with kidnappers before, but the stakes had never felt quite so personal. Perhaps it was the image of Young's tear-streaked face, or the thought of a family torn apart by criminal greed, but felt a burning determination to see justice done. The old mill came into view after a 20-minute ride. It stood at the edge of a small clearing, its weathered wooden walls and broken water wheel telling the story of better days long past. Dismounted well before reaching the clearing, tethering his horse to a tree where it wouldn't be seen. From this distance, he could make out the gray van had described, parked behind the mill where it would be hidden from the main road. Moving carefully through the underbrush, crept closer to the building. The afternoon sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky, casting longer shadows that provided better cover for his approach. As he reached the edge of the clearing, he could hear voices coming from inside the mill, rough, coarse voices that spoke of violence and cruelty with casual indifference. Through a broken window, caught his first glimpse of the criminals. 4 men, just as had said, sitting around a makeshift table playing cards. Their weapons were within easy reach, and their conversation revealed the callous nature of their business. They spoke of their captives as if they were mere cargo, discussing transport arrangements and monetary transactions with the cold efficiency of merchants haggling over grain. But his attention was immediately drawn to the van. Even from his hiding spot, he could see that it was modified for transporting people against their will. The windows were blacked out, and he could make out the outline of a sturdy lock on the rear doors. His heart pounded as he realized that the Copper family was likely inside that metal prison, probably terrified and wondering if help would ever come. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made his pulse quicken. For a moment, he worried that the criminals had lookouts he hadn't spotted, but then he recognized the familiar rhythm of Royal Guard horses. Sergeant Williams had received his message and was arriving with backup, just as had hoped. Carefully made his way back through the woods to intercept the rescue team before they got too close. Sergeant Williams, a grizzled veteran with 20 years of experience, led a group of 6 guards, all mounted and ready for action. "Captain," Williams said in a low voice as emerged from the trees. "The boy found us just as you ordered. Brave little fellow wouldn't stop talking until we understood exactly what was happening." "Where is now?" asked. "Safe at the station with Commander Harrison. He wanted to come with us, but we convinced him he'd be more help staying behind." Williams gestured toward the mill. "What's the situation?" Quickly briefed his team on what he had observed: the number of criminals, their weapons, the layout of the mill, and the location of the van containing the hostages. As he spoke, he could see the same anger and determination in his fellow guards' faces that he felt burning in his own chest. "The priority is getting the family out safely," emphasized. "These men are professionals, and they won't hesitate to harm their captives if they feel threatened. We need to move fast and coordinate our approach carefully." Williams nodded grimly. "What's your plan, Captain?" Had been thinking about this during his reconnaissance. "We split into 2 groups. Williams, take 3 men and approach from the front. Make noise, let them know you're there, but don't engage immediately. Give them a chance to focus their attention on you. Meanwhile, I'll take the other 2 guards and circle around to the back. While they're distracted by your group, we'll get to the van and extract the hostages." "And then," one of the younger guards asked. Then we have them surrounded with the civilians safely out of harm's way, replied. At that point, they can surrender or face the consequences of their choices. The plan was risky, but it was their best chance of saving the Copper family without casualties. Checked his equipment one final time, sword sharp, armor secure, rope coiled and ready for use. Around him, his fellow guards made their own preparations, their faces set with grim determination. As the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, casting an orange glow across the landscape, couldn't help but think about Young. The boy's courage in seeking help had given them this opportunity, but it would be up to the guards to see it through. Somewhere in that van, a family waited in fear and uncertainty, not knowing that salvation was finally at hand. The rescue was about to begin, and silently vowed that he would not fail the brave boy who had trusted him with his family's lives. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether the Copper family would be reunited or whether their story would end in tragedy. As the two groups of guards moved into position, felt the familiar calm that came before action. Years of training and experience had prepared him for this moment, but it was faith in him that gave him the strength to see it through. The real test was about to begin. The rescue operation began with the precision that came from years of training and the desperation that came from knowing innocent lives hung in the balance. Crouched at the edge of the forest with guards and Kay, watching as Sergeant Williams led his team toward the front of the old mill. The plan was simple in concept, but required perfect timing and nerves of steel to execute. Williams and his men made their approach deliberately visible, their armor clanking just enough to announce their presence without seeming like an obvious distraction. Watched through the broken windows as the four criminals inside the mill immediately tensed, abandoning their card game and reaching for their weapons. The leader, a man with graying hair, barked orders to his companions. "Looks like we've got company," the leader growled, peering through the window toward Williams's approaching team. "How did they find us?" "Must be a routine patrol," one of the others suggested nervously. "Maybe they'll just pass by." "Don't be stupid," the leader snapped. "Guards don't come this far out for routine patrols. Someone talked." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "When this is over, we're going to have to clean house." Felt his blood run cold at the implication. These men were not only kidnappers, but killers as well, and they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone they saw as a threat to their operation. The urgency of getting the Copper family to safety increased tenfold. The leader gestured to two of his men. "You two get outside and see what they want. Play dumb. Tell them you're just travelers seeking shelter for the night. Meanwhile, I'll keep an eye on our cargo." He glanced toward the van with a cruel smile. "If things go bad, we'll have something to bargain with." His heart pounded as he realized the criminals were about to split up, with some remaining near the hostages while others dealt with the guards out front. This complicated their plan significantly, but it also presented an opportunity. If he could reach the van while the leader was distracted by the confrontation at the front of the mill, he might be able to free the Copper family before the criminals realized what was happening. He signaled to and Kay, indicating that they should move closer to the van while he prepared to engage any remaining threats. Both guards nodded their understanding, their faces grim but determined. A father of three himself seemed particularly motivated by the thought of a family in danger. The two criminal lookouts emerged from the mill, trying to appear casual as they approached Williams and his team. Could hear their voices carrying across the clearing as they attempted their deception. "Good evening, officers," one of them called out, his tone overly friendly. "Beautiful night for a ride, isn't it?" Williams, playing his part perfectly, maintained a stern but not immediately threatening posture. "We're investigating reports of suspicious activity in this area. Have you seen anything unusual?" "Unusual? No, sir, can't say that we have," the criminal replied. "We're just travelers seeking shelter for the night. This old mill seemed like a good place to rest our horses." Used this distraction to make his move. He sprinted from the tree line in a low crouch, using the van itself as cover from the mill windows, and Kay followed close behind, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. As they reached the vehicle, could hear muffled sounds from inside, voices speaking in hushed, frightened tones. The lock on the van's rear doors was heavy and sophisticated, clearly designed to prevent escape from the inside, but had come prepared with lock-picking tools, a skill he had learned during his early years in the Guard when investigating criminal hideouts was a regular part of his duties. Working as quietly as possible, inserted his tools into the lock mechanism. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, years of training allowing him to focus completely on the task at hand. Behind him, and Kay kept watch, their weapons drawn and ready to defend against any threats. The lock clicked open with a soft sound that seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. Carefully pulled open the doors, not knowing exactly what he would find inside. The interior of the van was dimly lit, but he could make out three figures huddled together in the far corner. A man, a woman, and a small girl who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "Mr. and Mrs. Copper," whispered, trying to keep his voice low while still conveying urgency. The man's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Who are you?" he asked in a voice hoarse from days of fear and thirst. "I'm captain of the Royal Guard," replied softly. "Your son sent me to find you. We're here to get you out." The relief that washed over the family's faces was almost overwhelming. Mrs. Copper, a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes that had seen too much fear in recent days, clutched her young daughter closer to her chest. "Is he safe? We've been so worried." "He's safe and brave," assured her. "He's the reason we found you. Now we need to move quickly and quietly. Can you walk?" Mr. Copper nodded, though could see he was weak from his ordeal. "We can manage. Just get us away from here." Help the family out of the van, and Kay immediately positioning themselves to provide protection. The little girl, who realized must be sister, looked up at him with eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. "Are the bad men going to hurt us anymore?" she whispered. Knelt down to her level, his heart breaking at the innocence in her voice. "No, sweetheart, we're going to make sure you're safe. Can you be very quiet for me while we walk to where our horses are?" She nodded solemnly, and was struck by the resilience children possessed in the face of unimaginable circumstances. The entire family had endured 3 days of captivity, not knowing if they would ever see freedom again, yet they were ready to trust him completely based on nothing more than the mention of his name. The group began moving slowly toward the tree line, supporting Mr. Copper while helped Mrs. Copper with her daughter. They had covered perhaps half the distance when disaster struck. One of the criminals who had been talking to Williams at the front of the mill decided to check on the van. Heard the man's footsteps before he saw him, but by then it was too late to hide. The criminal rounded the corner of the mill and stopped dead in his tracks, staring in shock at the rescue in progress. For a heartbeat, neither side moved. Then the criminal opened his mouth to shout a warning to his companions. Didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the man, tackling him to the ground before he could raise the alarm. The two men rolled in the dirt, the criminal fighting with the desperate strength of someone whose freedom depended on victory. Was stronger and better trained, but his opponent fought dirty, going for eyes and throat with vicious determination. Immediately stepped in to help, but Mrs. Copper grabbed his arm. "My husband can't make it to the trees on his own," she said urgently. "If you leave us, we'll all be caught." It was an impossible choice, but made it without hesitation. His duty was to protect the civilians, even if it meant leaving his captain to fight alone. He continued helping the family toward safety while struggled with the criminal on the ground. The fight seemed to last forever, though it was probably only seconds. Finally managed to get his opponent in a chokehold, applying pressure until the man went limp. But the damage was done. The commotion had been loud enough to alert the others. "What was that noise?" heard the leader shout from inside the mill. The careful plan was falling apart, but the Copper family was now only yards from the safety of the trees. Sprinted after them, knowing that once they reached cover, and Kay could get them to the horses and away from danger. Just as they reached the tree line, the leader of the criminals emerged from the mill and spotted them. His face contorted with rage as he realized his captives were escaping. "The hostages are getting away," he roared. "Kill them all." The battle that erupted was unlike anything he had experienced in his years of service. The criminals, realizing they had nothing left to lose, fought with savage desperation. The leader raised his crossbow and aimed at Mrs. Copper's back as she ran with her daughter. Threw himself between them just as the bolt was released. The projectile struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded through his body, but he forced himself to stay conscious. The family's safety depended on it. And Kay engaged the other criminals while Williams and his team, hearing the sounds of battle, abandoned their careful approach and charged toward the fight. The clearing erupted in chaos as swords clashed and men shouted. Through his pain, watched Mrs. Copper reach the horses with her daughter. Mr. Copper, despite his weakness, was helping fight off one of the criminals. The man who had been a victim only moments before was now defending his family's freedom with everything he had. The tide of battle turned when Williams and his reinforcements arrived. Surrounded and outnumbered, the criminals had no choice but to surrender or die. Most chose surrender, though their leader continued fighting until Williams personally disarmed him. As the dust settled, lay on the ground, his shoulder throbbing but his heart filled with triumph. The Copper family was safe. His desperate plea had not been in vain. Mrs. Copper knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved our lives." "Your son saved your lives," replied weakly. "I just followed his directions." Was binding's wound with strips torn from his own shirt. "The bolt went clean through," he reported. "You'll be fine, Captain, but we need to get you to a healer." As his fellow guards helped him to his feet, looked around at the scene of their victory. The criminals were bound and ready for transport to the kingdom's dungeons, where they would face justice for their crimes. The van that had been a prison was now empty, its doors standing open like a symbol of freedom. But most importantly, the Copper family was together and safe. Mr. Copper had his arm around his wife, while their little daughter clung to her mother's skirt. They were free to return to their normal lives, to sell vegetables in the market and make horseshoes and be a family again. The rescue was complete, but knew the real reunion was yet to come. Somewhere in the guard station, a brave little boy named was waiting to learn whether his desperate gamble had paid off. The thought of that reunion gave the strength to endure the pain in his shoulder and the long ride back to town. As they prepared to leave the old mill behind, took one last look at the place where innocence had been threatened and justice had ultimately prevailed. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, as if nature itself was celebrating the victory of good over evil. The journey back to town would be slow, with wounded and the family still recovering from their ordeal. But they were all going home, and that was what mattered most. His courage had set in motion a chain of events that had saved his family and brought dangerous criminals to justice. The second part of their story was ending, but knew the most emotional moment was still to come. The journey back to town moved at a careful pace, with the rescued Copper family riding on horseback alongside the royal guards. Despite the throbbing pain in his shoulder where the crossbow bolt had pierced through, insisted on staying upright in his saddle. His wound had been properly bandaged by who had learned field medicine during his early years in the guard, but the captain knew he would need proper treatment from the town healer soon. Mrs. Copper rode close beside him, her 5-year-old daughter sitting safely in front of her. The little girl had barely spoken since the rescue, but her large eyes took in everything around her with the watchful awareness of a child who had experienced too much danger for her young age. Her name was Sarah, had learned, and she had been incredibly brave during their 3 days of captivity. Mr. Copper, whose name was Thomas, rode slightly behind them. He was a sturdy man in his early 30s, with the calloused hands of someone who worked with metal and fire every day. Despite the ordeal he had endured, his first concern was not for himself, but for his son who was waiting back in town. "Captain," Thomas said as they crested a small hill that gave them their first view of the town's lights twinkling in the growing darkness. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done, but I need you to know that he's special. That boy has more courage than most grown men I know." Nodded, though the movement sent a fresh wave of pain through his shoulder. "He saved your lives by seeking help. Not many children would have had the presence of mind to do what he did." "He's always been protective of his family," Mrs. Copper added, her voice filled with both pride and worry. "Sometimes I think he feels responsible for taking care of all of us. When those men took us, the last thing I saw was hiding behind our house. I was terrified they would find him too, but I was also grateful that at least one of my children would be safe." Sarah finally spoke up, her small voice barely audible above the sound of the horses' hooves on the cobblestone road. "Is really okay? The bad men said they would hurt him if we tried to escape." Turned in his saddle to look at the little girl, his heart breaking at the fear still evident in her eyes. "Is completely safe," he assured her. "He's waiting for you at the guard station with some very nice people who have been taking care of him. He's probably worried about all of you right now." "He always worries about us," Sarah said matter-of-factly. Even though he's little too, he always tries to protect me. When Mama was sick last winter, gave me his blanket and said big brothers are supposed to take care of their sisters. The simple innocence of her words struck deeply. Here was a family bound together by genuine love and care for one another, and criminals had tried to tear that apart for nothing more than money. It reinforced his belief that justice was not just about enforcing laws, but about protecting the things that made life worth living. As they approached the town gates, word of their success had already spread. A small crowd had gathered, including Commander Harrison, the healer who would tend to wound, and several townspeople who knew the Copper family. But attention was focused entirely on the small figure standing near the guard station entrance. Stood there in clothes that were too big for him, probably borrowed from the guards, his sandy hair now somewhat combed, but his eyes scanning the approaching riders with desperate intensity. The moment he spotted his family, his face transformed with an expression of pure joy and relief that would remember for the rest of his life. "Mama, Papa, Sarah!" shouted, breaking free from the guards who had been gently restraining him and running toward the horses. The reunion that followed was one of the most emotionally powerful moments had ever witnessed. Thomas dismounted as quickly as his weakened condition allowed and caught his son in an embrace so fierce that both of them nearly fell over. Mrs. Copper was crying as she handed Sarah down to her husband and then slid from her own horse to wrap both her children in her arms. For several minutes, the family simply held each other, tears flowing freely as they reassured themselves that everyone was truly safe. Kept touching his parents' faces as if he couldn't quite believe they were real, while Sarah clung to her big brother with the absolute trust that only exists between siblings. "I was so scared," whispered. "I thought I might not be able to save you." "You did save us," Thomas told his son firmly. "You were braver than any grown man could have been. You found the right person to help us, and you never gave up. I'm so proud of you, son." Dismounted carefully, trying not to aggravate his wounded shoulder, Commander Harrison immediately approached him with concern evident on his weathered face. "How bad is the wound, Captain?" Harrison asked, examining the blood-stained bandage with the practiced eye of someone who had seen many battle injuries. "I'll live," replied simply. "The important thing is that the family is safe and the criminals are in custody. How many people were involved in this operation?" "From what we've been able to determine, it was part of a larger trafficking ring," Harrison explained. "The 4 we captured were just one cell. We're already coordinating with neighboring kingdoms to track down the rest of the network." As they spoke, Healer approached with her bag of medical supplies. She was a woman in her 50s who had been treating the town's injuries and illnesses for over 2 decades. Her gentle hands and vast knowledge had saved countless lives and trusted her completely. "Let's get you inside and properly treated," said, her tone brooking no argument. "That wound needs to be cleaned and stitched before infection can set in." But hesitated, his attention drawn back to the Copper family. Had noticed him standing nearby and was approaching with the kind of determined expression that was beginning to recognize as characteristic of the boy. "Captain," said, his voice serious despite his obvious joy at having his family back. "Thank you for believing me. A lot of grown-ups don't really listen to kids, but you did." Knelt down to Slevel, ignoring the protest from his injured shoulder. "You made it easy to listen. You were clear about what was wrong, and you were willing to trust me to help. That took a lot of courage." "My papa always says that sometimes the right thing to do is also the scary thing to do," replied. "I was really scared to talk to you, because what if you didn't believe me? But I was more scared of what would happen to my family if I didn't try." The wisdom in those words, coming from such a young child, impressed everyone within earshot. Realized that his parents had raised him with values that would serve him well throughout his life, and that the boy's natural courage would likely lead him to do great things as he grew older. Mrs. Copper approached them, still holding Sarah's hand. "Captain, I hope you'll forgive me for asking, but are you married? Do you have children of your own?" Shook his head. "No, ma'am. I've devoted most of my life to the Guard service, but after meeting your family, I'm beginning to understand what I might be missing." "Family isn't just about blood," Thomas said, joining the conversation. "You risked your life to save people you'd never met before today. In my book, that makes you part of our family if you want to be." The offer was made with such genuine warmth that felt his throat tighten with emotion. In all his years of service, he had protected many people and solved many problems, but he had never felt such a personal connection to the people he was helping. "I would be honored," replied simply. Healer finally insisted that come inside for treatment, and the Copper family was taken to a comfortable room where they could rest and recover from their ordeal. But before they separated, made one more request. "Captain," he said, tugging gently on the man's good arm, "when you're feeling better, would you like to come have dinner with us? Mama makes the best vegetable stew in the whole kingdom, and I want to show you my collection of interesting rocks." Smiled despite the increasing pain in his shoulder. "I would like that very much. It would be my honor to have dinner with the bravest boy I've ever met." As led him away for treatment, reflected on the extraordinary events of the day. It had started as a routine patrol through the marketplace and had become something that would stay with him forever. His courage had not only saved his family, but had also given a new perspective on what truly mattered in life. The treatment of his wound was painful but necessary. Worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the puncture carefully and stitching it closed with neat, precise movements. Throughout the process, she kept up a steady stream of conversation that helped distract him from the discomfort. "That boy has been the talk of the station all day," she said as she worked. The guards couldn't stop praising his bravery. Sergeant Williams said he's never seen a child so determined to help his family. "He's remarkable," agreed. "His parents have raised him well." "It's rare to see such strong family bonds," continued. "In my experience, children who grow up with that kind of love and support tend to become exceptional adults. I wouldn't be surprised if Young follows in your footsteps someday." The thought of potentially joining the Royal Guard in the future intrigued. The boy certainly had the courage and moral compass for it, though hoped that by the time was old enough to make that choice, the kingdom would be peaceful enough that such dangerous rescues would be unnecessary. When the treatment was finished, felt significantly better, though warned him to take things easy for several days while the wound healed. He made his way back to where the Copper family was resting, finding them in animated conversation about their experience and their plans for returning to normal life. "How are you feeling?" Mrs. Copper asked when she saw him enter the room. "Much better, thanks to skilled hands," replied. "How are all of you doing? I know the last few days have been traumatic." "We're together," Thomas said simply. "That's what matters most. Everything else can be rebuilt or replaced, but family can't." "The house might need some repairs," Mrs. Copper added. "Those men weren't gentle when they broke in, but our neighbors have already offered to help us fix whatever needs fixing." It struck how quickly the community had around the Copper family. Word of their kidnapping and rescue had spread throughout the town, and people who had known them from the marketplace were already organizing support. It was a reminder of why he had chosen to devote his life to protecting these people and this place. Had been quietly listening to the adult conversation, but now he spoke up. "Captain, what's going to happen to the bad men?" It was a fair question, and one that deserved an honest answer. "They'll go to trial," explained. "A judge will listen to all the evidence and decide what their punishment should be. Because they kidnapped you and your family, and because they hurt people, they'll probably spend many years in prison." "Good," said with a firmness that surprised. "They shouldn't be allowed to hurt other families like they hurt us." The boy's sense of justice was remarkably mature, but it was tempered with compassion rather than vengeance. Could see that even after everything he had experienced, remained fundamentally good-hearted and hopeful about the world. As the evening wore on, the Copper family prepared to return to their home for the first time in 3 days. Commander Harrison had arranged for guards to escort them and to patrol their neighborhood for the next several days, just to ensure their safety and peace of mind. Before they left, approached one more time. "Will you really come have dinner with us?" he asked. "I wasn't just being polite, I really want you to come." Smiled and knelt down to the boy's level again. "I promise I'll come. How about tomorrow evening if that works for your parents?" His face lit up with excitement. "Really? That would be the best thing ever." He paused, then added more seriously, "And Captain, thank you for not giving up on us, even when it was dangerous." As the family departed with their guard escort, stood watching them go with a mixture of satisfaction and something deeper, a sense that his life had been fundamentally changed by meeting them. His courage had saved his family, but it had also taught something important about what it meant to truly serve others. The third part of their story was ending, but knew that this was really just the beginning of a relationship that would enrich all their lives for years to come. 3 months had passed since the dramatic rescue at the old mill, and life in the town had settled back into its comfortable routine. The marketplace once again buzzed with the familiar sounds of merchants hawking their wares, children playing between the stalls, and neighbors catching up on the latest news. But for those who had witnessed the events of that fateful day, something fundamental had changed. Captain had fully recovered from his shoulder wound, though he still carried a small scar as a reminder of his encounter with the criminal's crossbow. More importantly, he carried with him a new understanding of what it meant to serve his community. The rescue had not just been another successful mission. It had become a defining moment that shaped how he approached his duties and his life. The dinner invitation that had extended in the immediate aftermath of the rescue had indeed taken place the very next evening, and it had been the first of many such gatherings. What had started as a simple meal of gratitude had evolved into a genuine friendship between and the Copper family. He found himself looking forward to these visits with an anticipation that surprised him, coming to treasure the warmth and laughter that filled their modest home. On this particular evening, was walking through the marketplace as part of his regular patrol when he spotted helping his mother arrange vegetables at their stall. The boy had grown taller in the 3 months since the rescue, and there was a new confidence in his bearing that spoke of someone who had faced real danger and emerged stronger for it. Captain called out when he spotted him approaching, "Look what I found this morning." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a smooth, unusual stone that caught the light in interesting ways. Had learned during their dinners together that was fascinated by geology and had an impressive collection of interesting rocks and minerals that he had found around town and in the surrounding countryside. "That's a beautiful specimen," said, examining the stone carefully. "Where did you find it?" "Down by the river near where the old bridge used to be," explained excitedly. "I think it might be some kind of quartz, but it has these strange markings that I've never seen before. Papa said maybe you could help me figure out what it is." Mrs. Copper smiled as she watched the interaction between her son and the guard captain. "He's been working on a special project for school," she explained. "He's giving a presentation about different types of rocks and minerals next week, and he's been collecting samples from all over the region." "I'd be happy to take a look at your collection," offered. "I spent some time studying geology during my training years. The guard often needs to understand terrain and mineral deposits when planning patrols or investigating certain types of crimes." His eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? Could you come look at them tonight after dinner? I have almost 50 different specimens now, and I've been trying to identify all of them." Before could answer, a commotion near the fountain caught his attention. A woman was crying and gesturing frantically while several townspeople gathered around her, trying to understand what was wrong. His trained instincts immediately kicked in, and he excused himself from the Copper family to investigate. The woman was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly widow who lived alone in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. She was known for her kindness and her beautiful flower garden, and seeing her in such distress immediately concerned. "Mrs. Henderson," said gently, approaching her with the calm presence that had served him well in countless difficult situations. "What's happened? How can I help you?" "Oh, Captain," she sobbed, clutching at his arm. "It's my grandson, Billy. He's missing. He was supposed to visit me this afternoon, and when he didn't arrive, I went looking for him. I found his horse wandering loose near the old quarry, but there's no sign of Billy anywhere." Felt a familiar chill run down his spine. Billy Henderson was 15 years old enough to take care of himself under normal circumstances, but the old quarry was a dangerous place filled with deep water and unstable rock formations. It had been abandoned for years after several accidents, and most locals avoided it entirely. "How long has he been missing?" asked, his mind already working through the possibilities. "Since this morning," Mrs. Henderson replied. "He left his home in at dawn to ride here. The journey should have taken no more than 3 hours, even at a leisurely pace. When he hadn't arrived by mid-afternoon, I began to worry." Knew well, it was a small farming community about 20 miles away, connected to their town by a winding road that passed near several potentially hazardous areas, including the old quarry. If Billy had taken a detour to explore, or if his horse had been spooked by something, he could have ended up in serious trouble. "I'll organize a search party immediately," assured her. "We'll find Billy." As he began coordinating the search effort, was surprised to feel a small hand tugging at his sleeve. He looked down to see standing beside him, his young face set with determination. "I want to help look for Billy," announced. "I know all the secret places around here where a person might go if they were lost or hurt." His first instinct was to refuse. The search could be dangerous, especially if they had to explore areas like the quarry and was still just a child. But then he remembered the courage this boy had shown 3 months ago, and the way his intimate knowledge of the local area had been crucial to saving his own family. "This could be very dangerous," said carefully. "I appreciate your willingness to help, but I need to think about your safety too." "I'll be careful," promised, "and I'll stay close to the adults at all times, but Captain Billy is my friend. He taught me how to skip stones on the river last summer. I can't just sit at home doing nothing while he might be in trouble." Mrs. Copper had followed her son and overheard the conversation. "Captain," she said quietly, "if you think could be genuinely helpful, Thomas and I trust your judgment. We know you would never put him in unnecessary danger." Considered the situation carefully. Billy Henderson was a good young man who had never caused trouble for anyone. If he was indeed missing near the quarry, time could be critical. His knowledge of the local terrain and hiding places might actually prove invaluable in locating him quickly. "All right," decided, "but you stay with me at all times and you follow every instruction I give you without question." Agreed. Nodded solemnly. Agreed. The search party that assembled included Sergeant Williams, 4 other guards, and several volunteer townspeople who knew the area well. They divided into 3 groups, each taking a different section of the route between town and the quarry, and were assigned the most potentially dangerous area around the quarry itself. As they approached the abandoned excavation site, was reminded of why it had been closed. The quarry was essentially a large crater filled with dark water of unknown depth, surrounded by steep rocky walls that had been weakened by years of weather and neglect. Warning signs posted around the perimeter made it clear that the area was considered highly dangerous. "Billy," called out as they began searching the area around the quarry's edge. "Billy Henderson, can you hear us?" They listened carefully for any response, but heard only the sound of wind moving through the abandoned equipment that still littered the site. Moved carefully beside, his sharp young eyes scanning every shadow and crevice that might provide shelter or concealment. "Captain," said after they had been searching for about 20 minutes, "I think I hear something." Stopped and listened intently. At first he heard nothing unusual, but then a faint sound reached his ears, a weak voice calling for help, coming from somewhere below them. "Down there," pointed toward a section of the quarry wall where a narrow ledge was visible about 15 feet below the rim. "I think someone's on that ledge." Peered over the edge carefully, and his heart jumped as he spotted a figure lying motionless on the rocky outcropping. It was indeed Billy Henderson, and from this distance, it was impossible to tell how badly he might be injured. "Billy," called down, "can you hear me?" The response was weak but clear. "Help, I think my leg is broken. I can't climb up." Quickly assessed the situation. The ledge where Billy was trapped was too narrow and unstable for a full rescue team, but it might support one person if they were careful. The main challenge would be getting down to Billy and then getting both of them safely back up. "I need you to run back and find Sergeant Williams," instructed. "Tell him we found Billy on the east ledge of the quarry and we need rope and medical supplies. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," replied immediately, but then hesitated. "Will Billy be okay?" "I'm going to make sure of it," promised, "but I need that help quickly." As sprinted away to find the other searchers, began preparing for the dangerous descent to Billy's location. He secured his rope to a sturdy piece of abandoned mining equipment, then carefully tested it to ensure it would support his weight and Billy's combined. The climb down was treacherous, with loose rocks threatening to give way at any moment. But years of training served him well, and he reached the ledge safely. Up close, he could see that Billy was conscious but obviously in pain. His left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, and he had several cuts and bruises from his fall. "Easy there, Billy," said gently as he examined the young man's injuries. "Help is coming. Can you tell me what happened?" Billy grimaced as he tried to shift his position. "My horse got spooked by something near the road. Maybe a snake or a small animal. She reared up and threw me, then ran off. I was trying to catch her when I slipped and fell down here. I've been stuck since this morning." Could see that Billy was suffering from exposure as well as his injuries. The spring air was still quite cool, and he had been trapped on the exposed ledge for hours. Hypothermia could become a serious concern if they didn't get him to safety soon. The sound of voices above indicated that had successfully located the rescue team. Sergeant Williams appeared at the edge of the quarry, along with the other guards and several townspeople carrying additional rope and medical supplies. "How bad is it, Captain?" Williams called down. "Broken leg, possible hypothermia, but he's conscious and alert," replied. "We need to get him up quickly and get him to a healer." The rescue operation that followed required careful coordination and no small amount of luck. Using a complex system of ropes and pulleys, the team managed to lift Billy safely to the top of the quarry, with climbing alongside him to provide support and ensure he didn't slip from his makeshift stretcher. Once they reached the surface, Healer was waiting with her medical supplies. She quickly assessed Billy's condition and confirmed that while the leg fracture was serious, it was not life-threatening if properly treated. More concerning was his core body temperature, which had dropped dangerously low during his hours of exposure. "We need to get him warm and dry immediately," instructed. "And that leg needs to be set and splinted before we move him any further." As the medical team worked on Billy, found standing nearby, watching the proceedings with the same focused attention he had shown during his own family's crisis. The boy had proven invaluable once again, not only in locating Billy, but in quickly and efficiently summoning help when it was needed. "You did excellent work today," told him. "Billy is going to be fine thanks in large part to your sharp eyes and quick thinking." Blushed at the praise but remained focused on the injured young man. "Will his leg heal properly?" he asked with genuine concern. "Is the best healer in the region," assured him. "If anyone can fix Billy's leg, she can. He might walk with a slight limp for a while, but he should make a full recovery." Mrs. Henderson arrived just as they were preparing to transport Billy back to town. The relief on her face when she saw her grandson alive and conscious was almost overwhelming. She clutched his hand with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done if—" "Billy's going to be fine," interrupted gently. "He's a tough young man, and he was smart enough to stay put once he realized he couldn't climb out on his own. That probably saved his life." The journey back to town was slow and careful, with Billy transported on a makeshift stretcher carried by several of the volunteer searchers. Walked beside, occasionally glancing back at the quarry where they had found his friend. "Captain," said after they had walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, "do you think Billy would have died if we hadn't found him today?" It was a serious question that deserved an honest answer. "It's possible," replied. "Exposure to cold can be very dangerous, especially if someone is injured and can't move around to stay warm. But we did find him and he's going to be all right. Sometimes that's all we can ask for." "It's like what happened with my family," observed. "Bad things can happen to good people, but sometimes other good people are there to help when it matters most." The wisdom in those words struck deeply. Here was a 10-year-old boy who had experienced genuine terror and trauma, yet had emerged with a philosophy that emphasized hope and community rather than fear and mistrust. It was a lesson that many adults could learn from. As they reached the town limits, word of Billy's rescue had already spread. People lined the streets to see the procession and offer their support to Mrs. Henderson and her family. It was a reminder of the bonds that connected small communities, the way neighbors looked out for one another in times of crisis. That evening, as promised, joined the Copper family for dinner. The conversation naturally centered around the day's rescue, but it also included his presentation of his rock collection and his theories about the geological history of their region. The boy's curiosity and intelligence continued to impress, as did the loving support he received from his parents. As the evening drew to a close, made a comment that would stay with for the rest of his life. "You know, Captain," the boy said thoughtfully, "I used to think that being brave meant not being scared, but now I think being brave means doing the right thing even when you are scared." Realized that his relationship with the Copper family, which had begun with desperate plea for help 3 months earlier, had become one of the most important and meaningful parts of his life. The boy's courage had not only saved his family and helped rescue Billy Henderson, but had also taught profound lessons about service, community, and the bonds that make life worth living. In the months and years that followed, would continue to serve as captain of the Royal Guard, protecting the people of his community with skill and dedication. But he would always remember the day when a frightened child's desperate courage had changed everything, showing him that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can have the greatest impact on the world around us. The story of Urgent Plea had come full circle, from crisis to resolution, from fear to hope, from strangers to family. And in that circle, everyone involved had been transformed for the better.